Good morning, class. Welcome. I'm glad you're all here. We are about to embark on a journey that will fundamentally change how you think about learning, studying, and your own mind. Please look at the screen. This is the title of our lecture series. Over the next few weeks, we are going to explore the architecture of learning. We are going to move beyond the idea that learning is just memorizing facts for a test. We are going to see that knowledge is a vast shared space, a territory you have to navigate. And we are going to give you the tools, a system called EML, Educational Modeling Language, to become the architect of your own mind. But before we can build something new, we have to understand the problem with the old way. Let me ask you a question. How many of you feel overwhelmed by the amount of information you have to learn? How many of you feel like you're just cramming facts into your head only to forget them a week later? That's because you've been taught to operate with an outdated model.
This is the core question. Are you a bucket or are you a builder? On the left, we have the old way. This is how most of us were trained. You are a bucket. The teacher's job is to pour facts, dates, and rules into your head. Your job is to hold it all in without spilling. The problem is, the world is pouring in information faster than your bucket can hold it. You're overflowing, you're stressed, and most of what you catch is just a jumbled mess. Now, look at the right, the new way. This is what we are here to build. You are no longer a bucket. You are the operator of a sophisticated cognitive engine, the EML system. In this new model, raw information is just input. You don't try to hold it all. You process it through a structured system. You use time as a tool, not an enemy. You take control with your own agency. And what comes out the other side isn't a mess of facts, but organized, stable, powerful blocks of ancestral knowledge that you can use to build anything you want. This series is about teaching you how to build and operate that engine. We're going to start by looking at the most fundamental part of that engine, the part that keeps it from overheating. We're going to talk about sleep and why it's not just downtime, but essential educational infrastructure. Let's begin.
Good morning, everyone. Please settle in. Today, we are looking at a critical shift in how we understand learning. If you look at the board, we have the infographic for Step 3, dated the 29th of January. The title is right there at the bottom center, Sleep as Educational Infrastructure. Now, usually when we talk about infrastructure in education, we think of buildings, Wi-Fi, or textbooks. But this image argues that our biological rhythm, specifically sleep, is the most important infrastructure we have. Let's break this down, moving through the image to understand the argument. First, look at the center image. We see a human face with a mechanical, cutaway view of the brain. This represents the human cognitive hardware. The first lesson of the educational modeling language is that we are not infinite cloud servers. We are biological hardware with limits. We overheat, we get full, we need maintenance. Now, shift your eyes to the top left, where you see those looping arrows labeled rhythm equals sustainability. This is the counter-argument to how schools usually work. Point 1. The error of continuous learning. Look at the sketch of the bridge on the far left. It looks strained, doesn't it? Modern education assumes a continuous stream, just keep pouring information in. But this image argues that continuity leads to fragmentation. Instead, we need cycles. Follow the arrows. Learning is a loop, not a straight line. This brings us to the most important feature. Look at the bottom left, that glowing capsule containing a brain. This illustrates point 2, sleep as reboot. In this model, sleep is not time off. It is a structural phase of learning. Think of your computer. When it gets slow and glitchy, you restart it. That is what sleep does. It clears volatile states and consolidates memory. If you skip the reboot, the system crashes. Now, let's follow the flow to the top right. Here we see the expanded learning loop. You see the hand writing and the figure reading? That's the standard cycle, input and output. But look at what is added, visual projection. This leads us to the box on the far right, point 4, infographics. In EML, an infographic isn't just a pretty picture to break up text, it is a parallel cognitive channel. Notice how the lines connect the brain to the charts? That means we use visuals to process relationships that are too complex for words. Finally, look at the bottom right. We see a box, a literal container, and a set of scales. This represents sandboxing and caching. Point 5. Because our hardware, the brain, has limits, we have to put our learning into containers or sandboxes. We can't hold the whole world in our heads at once. We have to cache or save the key ideas and put the rest away. The scales represent sustainability. Point 6. If we balance the input with the reboot, the system holds. So, to summarize this slide, we are arguing that to learn effectively in an age of AI and high speed, we must treat rest not as a luxury, but as the engineering requirement that keeps the whole system running. Any questions on how the reboot concept changes our view of the daily schedule?
All right, class, let's keep the momentum going. We just looked at the essay, the finished argument, about sleep as infrastructure. Now I want to take you backstage to see how that argument was built. Please look at the next slide. This is the Step 2 analytical study, also dated 29 January 2026. Think of the previous image as the building. This image is the architectural blueprint. In our system, EML, Step 2 is where we take raw notes and analyze them structurally before writing the essay. Let's walk through the logic here, keeping in mind what we just saw in the Step 3 image. Number 1, the central insight, sleep as a subsystem, top left. Start at the top left. You see that branching network icon? The text there is crucial. Sleep as a first-class subsystem. In the previous slide, we called sleep a reboot. Here, we are analyzing why. In programming, a first-class object is a core part of the language, not an add-on. This analysis claims that sleep isn't just something you do when you're tired. It is a mandatory reset point built into the learning architecture. Notice the arrow pointing to the capsule in the center? That's the same reboot symbol from the last slide, but here it's defined as cognitive temporal infrastructure. It restores system coherence. Number 2. The expanded learning loop, top right. Move your eyes to the right side, marked Section 3.2. We see a cycle: handwriting, reading, projection, representation, reboot. This gives us more detail than the previous slide. It shows us that infographics, point 4, are not just art, they're a parallel signaling channel. The link. Remember the visual projection in the previous lecture? This diagram explains where it fits, right after AI projection and before the reboot. It's how we lock in understanding before we sleep. Number 3, governance tools, the box and the keys, bottom right. Now look down at the bottom right corner. You see a box and a set of keys. The box, sandboxing, this is structural containment. The analysis realizes that the human brain overflows if we pour too much in, so we sandbox learning. We put it in a safe, bounded container. The keys, caching, this represents caching as orientation. We can't remember everything, so we keep the keys, the core concepts, accessible in our cache, while the rest goes into storage. Insight. This explains the sustainability scale we saw in Step 3. You achieve sustainability by boxing up complexity and keeping only the keys. Number 4, navigation and governance, bottom left. Finally, look at the compass and anchor on the bottom left. This sums up the whole analysis, governance model. The argument here is that learning requires orientation. If you don't sleep, reboot, and you don't use visuals, maps, or infographics, you lose your compass. You get lost in the noise. Summary. So, connecting the two, the Step 3 essay argued that we must sleep to learn. The Step 2 analysis proves how that works mechanically. By treating sleep as a reset switch,
visuals as a map, and sandboxing as a way to manage the load. It establishes the rules: rest, containment, and orientation.
Welcome back, everyone. Let's move forward in time a few days. We are now looking at the Step 2 analytical study dated 1st February 2026. Please pull up the slide titled Dreaming, Return, and the Sandbox. If you remember our last session on January 29th, we talked about sleep as a system reboot, a maintenance cycle. Today, the analysis goes much deeper. We aren't just cleaning the machine anymore, we are seeing how the mind actually reads itself. 1. Dreaming as internal reading, top center. First, look at the very top center. You see a cloud with a cycle of books inside it? The text says, internal reading cycle. This is a major shift. We are no longer saying sleep is just downtime. We are saying that dreaming is an act of literacy. It's a read-return loop. The mind is taking the images and ideas you worked on during the day and rereading them internally. It's processing meaning without you having to hold a pen. Number 2, the definition of knowledge space, left side. Now, look to the left. You see that network of nodes and flags? This introduces the most important concept we will cover today, knowledge space. I want you to write this definition down because it is going to grow in the next few lectures. Knowledge space is not a container inside your head. It is a shared territory, a landscape of symbols, language, and relations that you enter and navigate. Look at the diagram. The flag marks a position. To know something isn't to own it, it's to locate yourself in that region of the map. You are occupying a position in the knowledge space. Number 3, sandboxing, the boundary condition, bottom right. Now, let's look at the bottom right corner. There's our familiar box again, the sandbox. In our last lecture, January 29th, we said sandboxing was for containment to stop us from getting overwhelmed. Here, the concept evolves. It's now called a boundary condition. Why does this matter? Because if knowledge space is a giant infinite territory, you can get lost in it. The sandbox creates a safe, fenced-off area where you can let these internal reading cycles happen without chaos. It protects the learning process. Number 4, Section 3.3, the EML layers, bottom center dashboard. Finally, I want to draw your attention to the detailed panel at the bottom, labeled 3.3 Key Constructs and their EML layers. This is the engine room of the analysis. In EML, we categorize every idea into layers. Let's look at the 3 specific ones listed here. Cognitive temporal. Look at the first entry, dreaming as internal read-return. It is assigned to the cognitive temporal layer. Why? Because it deals with time and rhythm. Learning happens over time through the rhythm of returning to an idea in your sleep. Structural. Look at the second entry, knowledge space. This is assigned to the structural layer. Why? Because the space itself, the terrain, the symbols, the grammar, is the structure we are navigating. The sandbox is also structural. It's the walls of the room. Agentic. Look at dialogic internal voices. This refers to the agent, the learner. It acknowledges that inside that sandbox, there are different parts of you talking to each other. That's the agency in the system. So, putting it all together, this slide tells us that we enter a knowledge space, structure, we use sandboxes to stay safe, structure, and we use dreaming and return, time, to let our internal voices make sense of it all. The key takeaway: you don't just download knowledge, you inhabit a space and let it cycle through you.
All right, class, eyes front. Things are about to get really interesting. We are looking at the Step 3 academic essay infographic dated February 1st, 2026. Yesterday, we looked at the analysis of dreaming. Today, we are looking at the philosophy of it. And I want to warn you, This slide changes the definition of what it means to learn. It moves us from a biological model to a cybernetic model. Let's break this down into three massive concepts. 1. The knowledge space. You are here, top right. First, I want you to focus intensely on the image in the top right, the map with the flags. This is the core concept of this entire lecture, knowledge space. Forget the idea that knowledge is a coin you put in your pocket. This essay argues that knowledge is a territory. Look at the text. Knowledge as a region. To know something isn't to possess it, it is to occupy a position within it. Think of it like GPS coordinates. If you are learning calculus, you aren't stuffing calculus into your brain. You are hiking into the calculus region of the knowledge space. You are setting up camp. Why does this matter? Because if knowledge is a space, then dreaming and thinking are just navigation tools. They help you figure out where you are on the map. 2. Dialogism in the sandbox, top right and bottom right. Now, look right next to that map at the overlapping speech bubbles. That represents dialogism. And look down at the wooden box, the sandbox. Here is the magic. When you enter the sandbox, that safe container, you aren't alone. Inside your mind, there are multiple voices: the creative voice, the critical voice, the memory voice. Usually, when you're awake and writing, you force these voices into a straight line, linear grammar. But in dreaming, top center, those voices are allowed to talk over each other. They interact, they argue, they condense. That is dialogism. It's the committee meeting in your head that solves problems while you sleep. And the sandbox is the conference room that keeps that meeting contained so it doesn't turn into chaos. 3. Governance as cybernetics, bottom left. Now, look at the bottom left corner. You see the compass and anchor labeled governance model. Here's where we get technical. In this essay, governance isn't about politics, it's about cybernetics. Does anyone know what cybernetics means? It comes from the Greek kybernetes, meaning steersman, the guy steering the ship. This entire diagram is a self-steering system. The input, you write and read. The feedback loop, you sleep and dream, the return arrows on the left. The constraint, the sandbox. This is pure cybernetics. If a system goes too fast, it crashes, overload. So we install a governor, the sandbox. If a system drifts off course, we need a correction mechanism, return. So learning isn't just trying hard. Learning is designing a cybernetic loop where you go out into the knowledge space and the system automatically steers you back to center via return and dreaming. Finally, look at section 4.3, the bottom panel. This is where we wire this philosophy into our machine code, EML. Cognitive temporal. Look at return as the primary engine. This confirms that time, looping back, is what drives the system, not forward speed. Structural. Look at structure as boundary condition. The structure isn't the content. The structure is the limit we place on the content. Agentic. This is you. You are the architect building these sandboxes. So, the big takeaway from February 1st? You are an explorer in a knowledge space. Your mind uses dreaming to hold a meeting with itself, dialogism, and to keep from going crazy, you build a cybernetic system of sandboxes and return loops to keep the ship on course. That is what we mean by educational infrastructure. Any questions?
Okay, class, let's keep this energy going. Someone just asked a fantastic question based on our last slide. If knowledge is a space we navigate and not a thing we own, how do we actually form a clear idea? Does it just appear, or do we have to build it? That is the perfect segue to our next slide. Please turn your attention to the Step 2 analytical study for 1 February 2026, titled Knowledge Space as Navigable Reality. This infographic answers that exact question. It tells the story of how a vague hunch turns into a crystal clear vision. First, I want everyone to look at the bottom left corner. You see that eye looking at a pattern of stars?
This is what we call the constellation moment. Think about the night sky. The stars are there, but they are just random dots until you connect them into a shape. A bear, a hunter, a dipper. Learning is exactly the same. When you first enter a new region of knowledge space, let's say you're starting calculus, it feels foggy. You see random dots, formulas, rules, symbols. It's vague. But as you stay in that region, occupy it, and work with the tools, suddenly, snap! The lines connect. The vague dots align into a clear shape. You have vision. This is vital. You didn't create the stars, you constructed the alignment. That is the difference between fantasy and vision. Now, look at the massive cloud structure at the top center connected to the brain. This is the shared knowledge space. Look at the list on the right under 3.2 Outline. Point 1, knowledge space is external and collective. This confirms what we said earlier. Calculus doesn't live in your head, it lives here in this shared library of human history. Point 2, knowing as occupation. Look at the little figure standing on the map with the flags. That is you. You are an explorer planting a flag in the terrain. You are saying, I am occupying this spot. But here's the catch. You can't just stand there. You have to build. So, 3, scaffolding, the engine of form. Shift your eyes to the right center. You see the hand drawing a block and then those blocks stacking up? This represents scaffolding. Point 4. Remember the student's question? How do we form a clear idea? We use scaffolds. When you are new to a region, like that calculus student, you're shaky. You don't have the constellation yet. So what do? You use tools. You use writing to catch your thoughts. You use AI projection to extend them. You use infographics to map them out. These tools act like the scaffolding on a building site. They hold your vague thoughts in place long enough for them to harden into concrete understanding. Finally, look at the main face in the center. Notice how it's half human, half machine/gears? This brings us to point 6, constructivism as engineering. We are not just passive observers looking at stars. We are engineers. We are using our tools, scaffolds, to build structures that fit into the knowledge space. If your structure is weak, it collapses. If it's strong, aligned, it stands. So, to answer the question, clear ideas don't just pop into your head. You enter the knowledge space, which is foggy and vague. You occupy a spot. You use scaffolds, writing, AI, maps to stabilize your position, and eventually, if you build it right, the fog clears, the stars align, and you get that flash of vision, the constellation moment. You are not just learning, you are terraforming. Welcome back, class. Please take your seats. In our last session, we established a challenging idea that knowledge isn't something you hold inside your head, but a vast shared territory you have to navigate, the knowledge space. That immediately leads to a very practical question, one that I know many of you grapple with when starting a hard subject. If I'm just wandering around a new territory, confused and lost, how do I ever get that moment of total clarity? How do I get a vision? Does it just hit you like lightning? No, it is built. Please look at the board. We are examining the infographic titled Step 2 Detail, the Vision as Constellation Moment and Timeline of Emergence, dated February 1st. This image is a timeline. It tells the story of how a vague hunch transforms into a powerful idea. Follow the big red arrows from left to right. Stage 1. The fog of entry, far left. Look at that poor figure with the compass. They have just stepped onto the map, the shared knowledge space. What do they see? They see fog. They see confusion. Most importantly, look at those glowing yellow dots scattered everywhere.
Those are fragments of knowledge, facts, symbols, data points. They're all there, but they make no sense. They're unconnected. This is what it feels like to begin. As the text below says, initial entry is foggy. You are occupying the space, but you don't understand it yet. This vagueness isn't a mistake, it's just the starting line. Stage 2, the mental construction site, the center. Now follow the first red arrow to the center section, scaffolding and iterative return. This is where the real work happens. Notice that the figure isn't just standing around waiting for inspiration. They're building. They're constructing a wooden framework around those scattered dots. This is scaffolding. When you first encounter a complex idea, your mind can't hold it all at once. The dots keep slipping away, so you need temporary supports to hold them in place while you figure out how they connect. Look at the specific tools they're using to build this scaffold. Writing, catching thoughts on paper before they escape, AI projection, using AI to help expand or clarify the fragments, infographics, mapping out relationships visually. The text below highlights a crucial concept, iterative alignment. You don't just build the scaffold once, you build it, step back, realize it's wrong, tear part of it down, and rebuild it. You return to it again and again. It is messy, hard work. Stage 3, the click of alignment, far right. And then, after all that work, something amazing happens. Follow the final arrow to the right. Constellation moment. Vision emerges. Look closely. What has changed? Are there new stars? No. The dots are exactly the same ones that were floating in the fog on the left. But now the scaffolding is gone. Why? Because the structure can stand on its own. The dots have snapped into alignment. Instead of chaos, you see a constellation, in this case, a bear. You recognize the pattern. That moment where the chaos suddenly becomes a recognizable form is the constellation moment. Look at the figure now. They're not confused. They have a glowing idea. And crucially, look at the beam of light shooting forward from the bear. The text says, it reveals present structure and future possibility. Once you see the pattern now, you can predict where it goes next. That is vision. Summary. Before we finish, look at the very bottom banner. It ties this whole timeline back to our core concept. This entire timeline represents the engagement with knowledge space. Vision is not magic. Vision is what happens when you enter a new territory, endure the fog, use your tools to scaffold the fragments, and keep working until the stars align. It is the reward for disciplined navigation.
Good morning, class. Settle in. In our last session, we looked at the timeline, the visual story of how we move from fog to clarity, ending with that brilliant constellation moment. Today, we are going to look at the engine under the hood of that timeline. We are turning to the Step 3 academic essay for February 1st, titled Knowledge Space as Navigable Reality, Engineering Form from Vague Intuition to Vision. This essay takes the ideas we've been sketching and solidifies them into a formal argument about what it actually means to learn. I want to focus on 3 crucial ideas from this text that redefine our roles as students and teachers. 1. The Great Displacement. Knowledge goes out there. The first thing this essay does is challenge our oldest assumption about learning. Conventionally, we treat education like filling a container. Your brain is the container, and knowledge is the stuff, facts, skills, memories that we pour into it. If you know something, it means it's locked inside your head. This essay argues that this model is fundamentally wrong, especially when dealing with complexity. Instead, it argues for knowledge beyond the mind, Essay Point 1. It proposes that knowledge is an external, shared space.
Think of it as a vast territory, a massive collective library of everything human beings have symbolized, written, and figured out. It exists between us, not just inside us. So what does that make learning? It's no longer about acquisition, it's about navigation. To know calculus isn't to have the formulas stored in your neurons, it is to hold a stable position in the calculus region of that shared territory, and to know how to move around within it using the right tools. You don't have knowledge, you occupy it. 2. The reading-writing cycle as engineering. If knowledge is a vast territory outside of us, and we start out foggy and confused, the vague intuition, how do we build solid ground to stand on? We don't do it just by sitting and thinking. We do it through a very specific process, which the essay calls the engineering of form, essay point 4. This completely changes how we view reading and writing. They aren't just homework tasks, they are engineering tools for navigating this external space. Writing is how we externalize our vague fragments. When you write in your journal or sketch a diagram, you are taking the fog inside your head and throwing it out into the shared space to see what it looks like. You are building a temporary scaffold. Reading is how we test that scaffold. We read against what we've written. We check, does this structure I built actually fit with the rest of the territory? Does it withstand scrutiny? The essay argues that we oscillate between these two. We write to expose fragments, and we read to test coherence. Through this cycle, we hammer vague ideas into solid forms, concepts that can stand up on their own in the shared world. 3. Revisiting the sandbox, the necessary constraint. Now, this sounds grand, navigating infinite spaces, engineering complex forms, but it's also overwhelming. If knowledge space is infinite, how do we not get paralyzed by the noise? This brings us back to a concept we introduced earlier, but which needs revision in this new light, the sandbox. If knowledge space is the entire territory, the sandbox is the construction site fence you put up around one small corner of it. You cannot engineer form in the entire universe at once. You need a boundary. The sandbox is where you run that reading-writing engineering cycle safely. It's a contained environment that respects your cognitive limits while you mess around with complex fragments. Without the sandbox, your engineering efforts disperse into the ether. You need the constraint of the box to let the pressure build up enough to forge a solid form. Summary. So the argument of this essay is a radical shift. It asks you to stop thinking of yourselves as containers waiting to be filled with content. Instead, start thinking of yourselves as engineers standing on the edge of a vast foggy territory. Your job is to set up a sandbox, use the tools of reading and writing to build scaffolds out into the fog, and keep refining them until they cohere into a solid, navigable reality. That is a much harder job than just memorizing facts, but it's also the only way to truly navigate complexity.
Good morning, class. Today, we need to do a little time travel. Over the last sessions, we've been looking at complex ideas from February 1st, things like constellation moments and engineering form within a vast knowledge space. But today, I want to hit pause and rewind the clock 2 days, back to January 30th, 2026. Look at the image on the screen titled, "Knowing is not possession, but occupation." Why are we going backward? Because before we could talk about navigating knowledge space or building within it, we first had to fundamentally break the oldest model of education we have. We had to redefine what it means to know something. This infographic is the battering ram that breaks that old model. It presents 2 radically different ways of viewing your own mind. First, the old model, possession, the left side. Look closely at the left side of the image, labeled possession model. This is how most of us were trained to think about school. Look at that head. It's cut open like a lid. It's basically a bucket. What's going into the bucket? Blocks. Clunky, rectangular blocks labeled facts, data, rules. Look at how they are in there. Are they organized? No. They are jumbled, chaotic, and just dumped in. The text below hits the nail on the head. Learner as container, acquiring and storing. In this model, knowledge is stuff you have. It's static property. The goal of learning is to get as many blocks as possible into the bucket before the lid closes. The test is just shaking the bucket to see if you can spit the right block back out. The problem with the bucket model is complexity. What happens when the world changes faster than you can load blocks? What happens when you need to solve a problem that doesn't look exactly like one of those pre-made cubes? The bucket fails. Second, the new model, occupation, the right side. Now shift your eyes to the right side, the occupation model. This is a completely different metaphor. Where is the head? It's gone.
Instead of a closed container, we have an open horizon. It's labeled shared knowledge space. It's a glowing grid, a territory, a landscape. Where is the learner? They aren't the bucket, they are that figure standing right there on the grid. Look at what they are doing. They aren't stuffing things into their pockets. They are holding a compass and a map. They are looking at the horizon. Notice the red lines glowing on the grid. Those are pathways. The text says, learner as positioned agent, inhabiting and navigating. In this model, you don't have knowledge, you occupy a region of it. To know history isn't to have a sack full of dates, it is to stand in the history region of this vast landscape and know how to find your way around, how to connect this hill to that valley. It is dynamic, it is about movement and orientation. Third, a thought experiment. To really lock this down, let's try a quick thought experiment. Imagine two people. Person A, the possessor, has memorized the entire Oxford English Dictionary, every single word. Their bucket is absolutely stuffed with fact blocks about words. Person B, the occupier, is a skilled poet and persuasive speechwriter. They don't know every word, but they know how words connect, how they feel, and how to use them to move an audience. Who knows English better? If you want someone to win a game of Scrabble, you might pick person A. They have the possession. But if you need someone to write a speech that convinces a nation to change its course, person A is useless. Their blocks are static. You need person B. Person B occupies the territory of language. They know the terrain and can navigate it to get somewhere new. Fourth, summary. Look back at the central brown box in the image. It summarizes the entire shift we are trying to make in this course. You do not have knowledge, you occupy a region of it. This January 30th insight is the foundation for everything we discussed later regarding February 1st. Because if knowledge is a space, as shown on the right, then we need scaffolds to build on it, we need sandboxes to practice in it, and we need vision to see across it. We are done treating you like buckets. We are training you to be explorers.
Welcome back, class. Keep your mental time machine set to January 30th, 2026. In our last mini-lecture, we threw out the bucket model of the mind. We agreed that you don't possess knowledge, you occupy it. But that leaves a massive dangling question. Occupy what? If knowledge isn't inside our heads, where is it? Please look at the infographic titled, What Knowledge Space Means Here. This image is the answer to that question. It is a map of the territory we are trying to explore in this course. This is not a metaphor for your brain. This is a map of the external world of ideas. First, just scan the landscape in the image. What is it made of? Look at the canyon walls on the left. Look at the ground itself. It's not made of dirt and rock. I see musical notation. I see mathematical formulas like the quadratic equation. I see alphabets, blueprints, gears, and compass roses. Now read the top brown box. Made of signs, symbols, representations, grammar, and tools, comparable to a library, map, or territory. This is crucial. The knowledge space is the accumulated, externalized intelligence of humanity. It exists between us, in our books, our servers, our diagrams, and our languages. It is massive, it is shared, and it was here before you were born. When you study a subject, say chemistry, you aren't trying to recreate chemistry inside your head. You are stepping into a pre-existing territory that thousands of other people have built over centuries. You are entering a landscape made of their symbols and rules. If knowledge is this vast, intimidating landscape, how do we move through it? We can't just wander aimlessly. Look at the human figures in the diagram. None of them are empty-handed. They are all using tools. The navigator, center. Look at the figure in the middle on the red path. They are holding a map and looking at a compass. They are orienting themselves. In our later lectures, Feb 1st, we talked about vague intuition, that fog. The map and compass are the tools you use when the fog is thick. They are your discipline's basic principles. The seer, top right. Look at the figure with the telescope. They aren't looking at their feet. They are looking across the chasm to distant regions. This is about seeing connections between different fields, how the mathematics region connects to the physics region. The builders, bottom right. This is my favorite part, and it links directly to a concept we discuss later, scaffolding. Look at those two figures with the blocks. In the old possession model, those blocks were facts to be stored in your head. But here, in the knowledge space, what are they doing? They are building with them. They are constructing a platform. Insight. This is scaffolding in action. When the terrain is too rough or steep to climb, you use the symbols and grammars of the discipline to build a temporary structure, a scaffold, that lets you stand higher and see further. You don't hoard the blocks, you use them to gain elevation. Let's make this concrete.
Imagine the knowledge space of computer programming. It's a huge territory. It's made of symbols, code, grammar, syntax rules, and tools, IDEs, GitHub. A novice programmer doesn't try to memorize every line of code ever written. That's impossible. Instead, they learn to navigate. They learn how to read the documentation, the map. They learn how to use the debugger, the compass. When they get stuck, they don't just sit there. They build a scaffold. They write a small, imperfect piece of code just to test an idea, knowing they will tear it down later. They are occupying the space and moving within it using tools. Let's conclude by looking at the bright red box at the very bottom right. This is the anchor for everything we are doing. Knowing, then, is where you stand and how you move, not what you possess. If you leave this class realizing that your value as a learning isn't how much you can memorize, but how effectively you can use tools to navigate this shared space and build scaffolds to reach new heights, then we have succeeded. You are cartographers of a landscape you didn't build, but which you are destined to explore.
Good morning, class. We are staying with our time machine set to January 30th, 2026. In our last few sessions, we've overturned the old bucket model of learning and established that knowledge is a vast, shared space to be navigated, not possessed. Today, we are looking at the infographic titled, Why Occupation Fits Your EML Work. Now, you might be asking, what is EML, and who is this you the image is talking to? Let me clarify. EML stands for Educational Modeling Language. It is a theoretical framework developed over many years of handwritten notebooks by a researcher named Erin Bradley. The entire system we have been exploring, the ideas of knowledge space, scaffolding, sandboxing, sleep as infrastructure, all of that comes out of Bradley's EML work. This specific image is a moment where the researcher, Bradley, is reflecting on why this new occupation model is such a perfect fit for the EML system he has been building. It's a bridge connecting the high-level philosophy to the practical tools of the system. The central argument, the red box. Let's start right in the center. Look at that bright red glowing text box. This is the core argument. Let's read it together. It provides the philosophical grounding for a system based on externalization, navigation, and tool use, EML, rather than internalization and memory. This is a powerful statement. It's saying that if you want to build a modern education system like EML, you cannot build it on the old foundation of internalization and memory, the bucket model. It won't work. A modern system must be built on 1. Externalization, getting thoughts out of your head and into the shared space, writing, diagramming. 2. Navigation, knowing how to move through that shared space. 3. Tool use, using scaffolds like AI, maps, and compasses to help you move. The occupation model is that philosophical foundation. It's the ground that makes EML possible. Connecting philosophy to practice, the 4 corners. Now let's look at the 4 corners of the infographic. See how they are all connected by red lines back to that central red box? These are the 4 main pillars of the EML system. The image is showing us how the occupation philosophy directly supports each one. Top left, the notebooks, externalization. Image, we see an open notebook with writing and a pen. This represents the core EML practice of daily handwriting. Connection, if knowledge is about possession, then notebooks are just places to dump facts before you memorize them. But if knowledge is about occupation, then the notebook is your primary tool for externalizing your position. It's your surveyor's log. It's how you mark where you are in the territory. Top right, the compass and map, orientation and navigation. Image, a compass on top of a map. Connection, in the possession model, you don't need a compass, you just need a bigger bucket. But in the occupation model, you are an explorer in a vast territory. You absolutely need tools for orientation and navigation. EML emphasizes these skills because the philosophy demands it. Bottom left, the scaffolding, tool use and construction. Image, figures building a large wooden scaffold. Connection, we've talked about this. You can't just fly to the top of a complex idea. You have to build your way up. EML provides the tools, the mental models, the diagrams, the writing prompts that act as scaffolding. The philosophy of occupation legitimizes the need for these temporary structures. Bottom right, the bridge, connecting domains. Image, a bridge connecting 2 separate cliffs over a chasm. Connection, the old model keeps knowledge in separate buckets, history in one, math in another. The occupation model sees one vast landscape with different regions. The goal is to build bridges between those regions, to see how historical events influenced mathematical discoveries, for example. EML is designed to help you engineer those connections. Summary. So this image is the glue. It explains why Erin Bradley's EML system looks the way it does. It's not just a random collection of study tips. It is a coherent system built on a single radical idea.
You are an occupier of a shared knowledge space, and your education is about learning the tools of the trade for that occupation.
Good morning, class. We are still on January 30th, 2026. In our previous mini-lectures today, we've attacked the old bucket model of the mind and replaced it with the idea of a vast shared knowledge space. Now, we are going to look at the infographic that ties this entire transformation together. Please look at the image titled Knowing as Occupation, a Precise Reformulation and Educational Implication. This image is a manifesto. It's a precise definition of the new world we are trying to enter. Number 1, the central thesis, the brown box. I want everyone's eyes right in the dead center on that dark brown text box. This is the heart of the matter. Everything else in the image radiates from this definition. Let's read the first sentence together. Knowing is not owning facts, but holding a position within a structured knowledge space that one can navigate, extend, and return to. This is the reformulation. It's a radical shift in definition. If you take nothing else from today, take this. Knowing equals holding a position. Number 2, the visual contrast, how to observe this image. Now, to understand what that definition means for school, we need to look at the contrast on either side of that box. This infographic is designed to force a comparison. The left side, the possession model, static. Look left. We are back to our bucket head. Observe the image. The head is open. Blocks are being dumped in. They are jumbled. It's messy. Observe the text, the red X's. Look at the words being crossed out. Teaching as delivery, learning as intake, forgetting as failure. Why are they crossed out? Because in the possession model, these are the only verbs that exist. If knowledge is just stuff in a bucket, the teacher is a delivery truck, and you are a loading dock. If you forget something, it means there's a hole in your bucket. It's a static, broken system. The right side, the occupation model, dynamic and spatial. Now look right. The head is gone, we are outdoors. Observe the image. We see a landscape. We see paths, bridges, and structures. We see figures actively doing things, building, walking, looking through telescopes. Observe the text, the green checks. Look at the new verbs. Teaching as cartography, map-making. Learning as navigation. Forgetting as loss of orientation. This is huge. If you forget, you aren't stupid. You are just temporarily lost. You need a compass, not a new brain. Number 3, a meta lesson, the infographic as scaffolding. Before we look at the bottom section, I want to pause and do something meta. I want to talk about how we are reading this image right now. Notice how complex that central definition is in the brown box. It's abstract philosophy. If I just wrote that on a blank board, you might struggle to grasp it. But Erin Bradley, who made this, didn't do that. She surrounded it with pictures, colors, and comparisons. This is a perfect example of scaffolding. Definition: scaffolding is a temporary support structure that helps you reach a higher level of understanding than you could reach on your own. Application: this infographic is a scaffold. It uses the visual contrast, left versus right, red versus green, bucket versus landscape, to support your understanding of the abstract text in the middle. It holds the complex idea in place so you can climb up and grasp it. Furthermore, this right side introduces a touch of dialogism. On the left, the bucket is silent. It just takes what it's given. On the right, the figures are interacting with the landscape, perhaps even signaling to each other. Learning becomes a dialogue between you and the territory. Number 4, the system emphasis, the bottom line. Finally, look at the bottom banner, system emphasis, EML. This is where the theory hits the road. If we accept that knowing is occupation, then our daily practices must change. We use handwriting as entry, marking our position. We practice return as core, reorienting ourselves. We build scaffolds as infrastructure, like the figures on the right. We develop vision as orientation, like the figure with the telescope. Summary: look at the very last line of the image. All of that only coheres if knowing is understood as occupation. This infographic is a map of the mindset shift required for this course. We are moving from a static model of owning facts to a dynamic model of inhabiting a complex world. You are no longer buckets to be filled. You are navigators learning to map a territory.
Welcome back for the final session of our January 30th time travel. We've covered a lot today. We've smashed the bucket model of the brain. We've mapped the vast knowledge space. We've defined knowing as occupying a position. Now we look at the single most important consequence of all those shifts. Please look at the infographic titled The Deepest Implication, Knowing as Endless Occupation. This image answers the question, okay, if I'm occupying this space, when am I done? When do I win the game? The answer is on the board. You don't. Number 1, the trap of finishing, the left side. Let's start on the left with the big red X. This is the trap of finishing.
This is the last gasp of the old possession model. Observe the metaphor. Look at that treasure chest labeled finished knowledge. It's closed. It's sealed. The trap? The old model taught us that learning is a checklist. You learn multiplication? Check. Done. You learn the state capitals? Check. Done. You put the treasure in the chest and close the lid. The result? Look at the figure standing next to it. They are bored. They are stuck at a dead end. Why? Because if knowledge can be finished, then once you know it, growth stops. It leads to stagnation. It's a trap because it tricks you into thinking the goal is to stop learning. Number 2, the central truth, the center box. Now move your eyes to the massive dark brown text box in the center. This is the antidote to the trap. Let's read it. This is the philosophy of the new world. You never finish knowing something. You only occupy it more stably, more deeply, or more responsibly over time. Let that sink in. You never finish knowing Shakespeare. You never finish knowing coding. You never finish knowing how to be a good friend. If you can't finish, what do? You improve the quality of your occupation. Number 3, the dynamics of occupation and scaffolding, the right side. Now look at the magnificent illustration on the right, the truth of occupation. Instead of a closed chest, we have an expansive, ancient, sprawling castle city. It's huge, but look closely. Is it finished? No, it's under constant construction. Look at the figures working on the castle. They are using tools, ladders, and wooden frameworks to build higher towers and fix old walls. Revisiting scaffolding? Remember our definition of scaffolding. It's a temporary structure used to support the building of something permanent. Applying it here, look at the wooden structures around the stone towers. Those are scaffolds. In this model, we are always using scaffolds, writing, diagramming, AI tools to maintain and expand our knowledge structure. We never stop building. The image shows us 3 ways this endless work happens. Follow the pointers from the central text box. Stably, bottom left. Look at the figures digging at the bottom. They are reinforcing the foundations. Sometimes learning means going back to the basics you thought you knew and making them stronger through return. Deeply, middle right. Look at the figures tunneling into the side of the structure. They are exploring hidden connections and plumbing. They aren't building up, they are building in, connecting ideas that seemed separate before. Responsibly, top right. Look at the figures on the highest towers with telescopes. They are extending reach. When you know something very well, your job isn't to hoard it, it's to use it to see further and to build platforms for others to stand on. Number 4, linking to grammar, bottom right. Finally, look at the bottom right corner pointing to the brain icon labeled EML. That is the grammar your recent work is building toward. We need to introduce a new term here, grammar. Definition. When we say grammar in everyday life, we mean rules about commas and verbs. But in system design, like EML, grammar means the underlying hidden rules that make the whole system function coherently. It's the operating logic. The connection? This image is saying that the fundamental grammar, the operating logic of this new way of learning is endlessness. The rule of the system is that you must always return, always scaffold, and always dig deeper. If you try to finish, you break the grammar of the system. So, the deepest implication of January 30th is a paradox. To truly become an expert, you must admit that you will always be a beginner. You trade the comfort of a closed treasure chest for the exhilarating, endless work of building a castle that is never finished.
Good afternoon, class. We've made it to February 1st, 2026. We've spent the last few lectures dismantling the old way of learning. We've embraced the idea that learning is an endless occupation of a vast knowledge space. But now we need to get practical. How do we do that? How do we build something solid in a world that is always changing? Today, we are looking at the Step 2 analytical study for February 1st, titled Key Ideas as Orientation Markers, Accretion, Visual Grammar, and Continuity Across Learning Cycles. This infographic introduces 4 powerful concepts that will be the tools we use to build our unfinishable castle. Before we dive into the image, let's define these terms. Write these down. Definitions. 1. Key ideas as orientation markers. Definition. These are not summaries of what you just learned. They are select, high-value concepts you carry forward to the next day to help you navigate. Think of them not as a backpack full of everything you own, but as the compass you set before you start walking. 2. Accretion. Definition. This is the process of growth by gradual accumulation. Learning doesn't happen in giant leaps.
It happens like a pearl forming around a grain of sand, or a coral reef growing. Little bits, fragments, stick together over time to form a larger, solid structure. 3. Visual grammar. Definition. We know what written grammar is, sentences, periods. Visual grammar is the set of rules for communicating complex relationships using space, lines, shapes, and color. An infographic isn't just a picture, it's a statement written in visual grammar. It can show connections like a bridge that words struggle to describe. 4. Continuity across learning cycles. Definition. This is the rejection of the daily reset. Most schools treat every day like a blank slate. Continuity means that today's work is built directly on top of yesterday's foundation. The cycle doesn't break, it spirals upward. Now, let's look at the infographic. This whole image is a diagram of a single engine designed to create continuity. 1. The problem, the broken chain, top left. Start at the top left. Look at that stopwatch and the broken chain. This represents the traditional model of learning. You learn something on Monday, snap, the chain breaks. You start fresh on Tuesday. This is the daily reset. It prevents accretion. You can't build a castle if the foundation disappears every night. 2. The solution, the expanded learning loop, center. Now look at the massive flowing loop in the center, labeled learning system. Notice that it's not a straight line. It's a cycle that feeds back into itself. Look at the big red arrow coming out of the brain. Key ideas as carryover mechanisms. This is our first definition in action. We don't let the day's work disappear. We extract the key ideas and use them to jumpstart the next cycle. 3. The process of accretion, left and right. How does that carryover lead to growth? Look at the 2 examples of accretion. Left side, the worker. A figure is building a wall block by block. Fragments assemble into forms. This is accretion in action. It's slow, deliberate work. Right side, the bridge. Look at the bridge under point 5, bridging time through representation. How do we connect yesterday to today? We build a bridge. And what is that bridge made of? Visual grammar. 4. Visual grammar as the structure, center and right. Look at the eye icon and the infographic icon in the center right. The text says, visual representation as parallel grammar, structural bridges across time. Words are linear, they come one after another. Visuals are spatial, they show everything at once. By using infographics, visual grammar, we can freeze a complex structure of ideas and carry it forward as a single unit. The visual becomes the stable structure that allows accretion to happen. It holds the fragments together while the glue dries. 5. The result, speaking forms and ancestral knowledge, bottom right. Where does this all lead? Look at the bottom right. Point 6, from fragments to speaking forms. Eventually, through accretion and visual structuring, a confused pile of facts becomes a clear, distinct idea that speaks for itself. Point 7, ancestral forms and the blue notebook. When an idea becomes that solid, you don't just throw it away. You put it in a special container, the blue notebook. It becomes an ancestor, a permanent part of your knowledge structure that you can rely on forever. Summary. This infographic is a blueprint for an unbreakable learning machine. You stop the daily reset by carrying over key ideas as orientation markers. You use visual grammar to build bridges across time. This allows small fragments to cohere through accretion, eventually building solid, permanent structures of knowledge. It's how you move from just doing schoolwork to actually building a mind.
Hello, everyone. Let's jump right back into it. In our last few sessions, we established a pretty grand vision of learning. We talked about building an endless castle through slow accumulation, accretion, and we talked about navigating a vast, foggy knowledge space. It sounds great in theory, but practically, how do you do that when real life feels chopping and disconnected? How do you build a continuous castle when it feels like the construction site gets bulldozed every night while you sleep? Today, we are looking at the infographic titled Learning Continuity and Key Ideas. This image diagnoses the single biggest problem in traditional education and offers a mechanical solution based on the ideas of time and configuration we've been discussing. First, the problem, the daily reset. Left panel. Look at the left side of the image. Does this feel familiar? We see 3 days, day 1, day 2, day 3. What's happening between them? A big red reset button is being pressed. The scenario. Think about a typical school week. On Monday, you learn about photosynthesis. The bell rings, you close the book. Tuesday morning, you open a different book and start learning about the Roman Empire. You pressed reset. The consequence. Look below the buttons. You see a broken chain and a pile of melting ice cubes. The text calls this activity without accumulation. You are working hard, making ice cubes, but because there is no continuity, your efforts melt away before they can build anything solid. This is the opposite of accretion, our castle building concept.
If you reset every day, you are just a producer of fragments, forever stuck on the ground floor. Second, the solution, temporal joints and configuration, top right panel. Now, look to the top right. Here is the antidote. Instead of separate days with reset buttons, we have a continuous bridge connecting yesterday, today, and tomorrow. What holds the bridge together? Look at those glowing blue gears. They are labeled key ideas, carryover. Here is where we connect back to our previous definitions. Time. In the old model, time is just a series of unrelated buckets. In this model, time is a continuous structure. Configuration. Look at the text pointing to the gear. Configuration points, not summaries. This is vital. A summary is just looking backward at what you did. A configuration point looks forward. It's like setting the dials on a complex machine before you turn it on today. You take the most important insight from yesterday and you use it to set up the machine for today's work. It ensures today's gears mesh perfectly with yesterday's. Third, orientation before expression, bottom right panel. Finally, look at the bottom right. How do you actually use these configuration points? Look at the figure with the telescope and the spotlight. They are standing at the beginning of today's cycle. The rule, the text says, orient attention before language flows. The mistake, most students sit down, open their notebook, and immediately start writing, expression. They start walking into the fog without checking their bearing. The correction, this model says, stop. Before you write a single word, look at the key idea you carried over, shine a spotlight on it, use your telescope, orient yourself. Why? Because that one idea determines the trajectory of everything you do next. As the image shows, the lines branch out from that orientation point. If you aim the telescope wrong, you build the castle in the wrong direction. Summary. So, let's pull this together with the concepts we've already learned. If learning is navigating a vast knowledge space, you cannot afford to wake up every morning with amnesia, the daily reset. You will just walk in circles. You must become a steward of continuity. You do this by taking key ideas, those hard-won insights from yesterday, and treating them as configuration points. You use them to mechanically link time together, ensuring that when you start building today, you are continuing the structure you started yesterday.
Good morning, everyone. Let's settle in. In our recent lectures, we've established a few grand ideas. We are navigating a vast knowledge space, and we are engaged in an endless occupation of building understanding. It sounds inspiring, but today we need to get down to the mechanics. How does that building actually happen? When you have a messy pile of facts in your head, how do they magically turn into a solid idea? Today, we are looking at the infographic titled Accretion and Visual Grammar. This image describes the physics of learning. It explains how we move from chaos to structure using two very specific tools. Part 1. Revising Key Concepts. Before we dissect the image, we must ensure we are using the same dictionary. We need to define one new term and heavily revise an old one. 1. Accretion, the process. Write this down. Accretion is growth by external addition. Think of a pearl. It starts as a tiny, irritating grain of sand. Over time, layer after layer of nacre is deposited onto it until it becomes a solid, valuable gem. Learning is not about swallowing a whole idea at once. It is about gathering tiny fragments over time and letting them stick together. 2. Grammar, the revision. Now, I need you to forget everything your third grade teacher told you about grammar. We are not talking about commas and semicolons. In system design, like our EML framework, grammar means the underlying structure that governs how things connect. Language has a grammar, rules for how words connect to make meaning. But ideas also have a grammar, rules for how concepts connect to form a theory. And today, we will see that visuals have a grammar, rules for using space and shape to show relationships. Part 2. The left panel, the emergence of form. Now, look at the left side of the image. 4. Accretion and the emergence of form. This three-stage diagram shows the life cycle of an idea. Stage 1. Fragments, gathering. Look at the image. On the far left, what do you see? Chaos. Gears, paper scraps, cubes scattered around. The reality, this is what it feels like when you start a new subject. You have bits of data, a definition here, a formula there. They don't connect. They are just fragments gathering. Stage 2. Alignment and coherence, repeated return.
Look at the image. In the middle, something is happening. The fragments are still there, but a blue and red wireframe is starting to connect them. It looks wobbly, like it might fall over. The mechanism. The text below emphasizes repeated return. You can't just gather the fragments once. You have to come back to them. Every time you review my notes, every time you try the homework problem again, you tighten those wireframe connections. The fragments begin to cohere, stick together. Stage 3. Structure becomes visible, speaks back. Look at the image. On the right, the payoff. The wobbly wireframe has become a solid, glowing, complex cube machine. The figure is standing back, observing it. The insight. The text says the construct begins to speak back. This is a crucial threshold. Example, think about learning to drive. At first, it's fragments. Mirror, signal, brake pedal, steering wheel. It's chaos. Then with practice, repeated return, it aligns. You can shakily make a turn. Finally, one day, you don't think about the parts. Driving has become a solid, autonomous concept in your mind. The structure works on its own. You can name it, diagram it, and refine it. Part 3. The right panel. Visual grammar as the bridge. Now, shift your attention to the right panel. 5. Visual grammar as temporal bridge. This side answers the question, why is accretion so hard if we only use words? The problem with language, the left bank. Look at the image. On the left side of the chasm, yesterday, you see a scrolling paper labeled Language Sequential. The analysis. Language is a river. It flows. I say a word and then it's gone, replaced by the next word. It is sequential. If you are trying to build a complex structure, accretion, using only a flowing river of words, it's very difficult. The pieces wash away before they can stick together. The solution, the visual bridge, the structure. Look at the image. Spanning the chasm of time is a bridge. What is it made of? It's not stone. It's made of infographics, charts, graphs, networks, diagrams. The power of visual grammar. Look at the speech bubble on the right. Preserves relationships simultaneously. This is the difference between linguistic grammar and visual grammar. A sentence tells you things one at a time. A diagram shows you everything at once. Because visuals are spatial, they exist in space, not just time, they freeze the relationships between the fragments. Synthesis, the link between accretion and grammar. Look at the figure on the right bank, yesterday. They are standing on that visual bridge, looking back. Here's the core point. Visual grammar is the glue designed to hold accreted knowledge. Because language is too slippery and sequential to hold complex structures over time, we need the stability of visual grammar to build the bridge from yesterday's fragments to today's understanding. Part 4. Q&A, deepening the understanding. This is a lot to take in. Let's process it with a couple of questions that often come up here. Question 1. Teacher, you said the structure speaks back in stage 3. Isn't that just a metaphor? Ideas don't talk. Answer. It is a metaphor, but a precise one. When we say a structure speaks back, we mean it has gained autonomy. Think about it. In stage 1, fragments, you have to do all the work to remember the bits. They are dead weight. In stage 3, structure, the idea has its own internal logic. If I ask you a question about driving, you don't have to mentally assemble the brake pedal and steering wheel to answer. You consult the finished structure. The structure itself provides the answer. It has become an object you can think with rather than just a pile of stuff you have to think about. Question 2. Does this mean we should stop writing and just draw pictures? Answer. Absolutely not. Look at the image again. The bridge connects yesterday to today. We often use language, writing, or journaling to gather the fragments in the first place, yesterday. But if we want those fragments to survive the night and be useful today, we need to translate them into visual grammar. Writing is great for exploration. Visuals are essential for consolidation and bridging time. You need both.
Welcome back, architects of the mind. Let's recap where we just were. In our last lecture on accretion and visual grammar, we watched a messy pile of fragments slowly cohere into a stable structure that speaks back. We also saw how visual grammar acts as a bridge across time, holding those structures steady from yesterday to today. But this raises a massive practical question. Once you have built one of those stable structures, where do you put it? If you leave it mixed in with your daily scratchpad notes, it will get buried again. It will dissolve back into fragments. Today, we are looking at the infographic titled Ancestral Forms and Form Building. This image provides the architectural solution to that problem and shows us exactly how our past learning supports our present work. Part 1. The left panel, Stabilization and Containers, number 6. Let's start on the left side. 6. Ancestral Forms and Dedicated Containers. This diagram shows the necessary migration of an idea. 1. The origin, daily journaling, fragments. Look at the image. On the far left, we see our familiar pile of messy scraps, gears, and cubes. The label says daily journaling. The context, this is the sand before it becomes a pearl. It's your rough notes, your first thoughts. It is necessary, but it is noisy. 2.
the transformation, stabilized constructs, ancestral forms. Look at the image. In the center, the arrow points to that glowing, complex cube machine again. It is labeled ancestral form. The definition: what makes an idea ancestral? It doesn't mean old. It means it is mature enough to parent other ideas. It is stable. It has achieved coherence. The parts fit together perfectly. It can stand on its own outside the chaos of daily noise. 3. The destination, the blue notebook, dedicated container. Look at the image. Where does that glowing cube go? Into a special, ornate book labeled Blue Notebook. The insight: the speech bubble calls this an architectural move. Think about it. You don't keep your finished, framed oil paintings in the same messy sketch pad where you test out pencil shading. You separate them. We need separate containers. The daily journal is for active, messy thinking. The Blue Notebook is a sanctuary for finished forms. By separating them, you prevent the noise from diluting the signal. You ensure the ancestral forms remain accessible. Part 2. The right panel, the bridge of the past, number 7. This is the most crucial part of today's lesson. This is where we see why we went through all the trouble of saving those ancestral forms in the Blue Notebook. 1. The path made of past ideas. Look at the timeline, flowing from past cycles to the current learner. The connection. Remember in the last lecture we talked about a visual bridge spanning time? Look closely at what this path is made of. It is paved with the ancestral forms from the left panel. The core concept. This is how ancestral ideas feed into the current moment. Your past stabilized insights literally become the ground you walk on today. They are the infrastructure that supports your current thinking. If you hadn't stabilized them, you'd be walking on quicksand. 2. The current learner as builder. Look at the figure on the right. What are they doing? They are standing firmly on those past forms. They hold a blueprint labeled coherence and a ruler. They are actively building a new structure. The shift and role. The text below defines the learner's new task. You are no longer just generating endless pages of notes, volume. Your task is to recognize fragments, emerging forms, and give them structure. You are using the stability of your past to engineer the coherence of your future. Summary. This infographic teaches us that not all writing is equal. There is messy daily writing, and there is stabilized ancestral writing. An effective learner knows the difference and has different containers for them. When you do this, your past efforts don't just disappear into a forgotten notebook. They become the bridge you stand on to reach higher today.
Welcome back, class. We have just finished a very intense sequence of ideas. We've watched fragments accrete into glowing, stable structures. We've built visual bridges across time. We've separated our messy daily notes from our ancestral forms in the Blue Notebook. Now we need to land the plane. Theory is useless if it doesn't change what you do tomorrow morning when you pick up your pen. Today, we are looking at the infographic combining 4.3 explicit links to EML and 4.4 directions for next handwritten cycle. Think of the left side, 4.3, as the mechanics checklist, confirming exactly which parts of our learning engine we just upgraded. Think of the right side, 4.4, as the flight plan for tomorrow's journey. Part 1, the mechanics checklist, left panel, 4.3. Let's start on the left, 4.3 explicit links to EML. EML is the system we are building. This section codifies the recent breakthroughs. Cognitive and temporal concepts clarified or extended, top row. Look at that row of 5 icons. These are the specific upgrades we've made to our understanding. 1. Clock icon, key ideas as temporal infrastructure. Remember the learning continuity bridge? We now officially recognize that key ideas aren't just summaries, they are the temporal joints that hold time together. 2. Compass icon, orientation as entry point governance. We established that before you write, you must orient. This is now a formal rule of the system, governance at the entry point. 3. Blocks icon, accretion as primary learning dynamic. Remember the fragments turning into the glowing cube? That process, accretion, is now officially our main model for how learning grows. 4. Infographic icon, visual grammar as parallel system. Remember the visual bridge spanning the chasm of time? We have formally recognized visual grammar as equal to textual grammar for holding structure. 5. Notebooks icon, containers as structural layers. This is the daily journal versus Blue Notebook concept from our last lecture. Different levels of idea maturity require different containers. EML layer emphasis, bottom row. How do these upgrades affect the core engine blocks of EML? Cognitive and temporal, clock, brain. We've emphasized that learning is about rhythm and continuity, carryover, not just speed. Structural, temple. We've added massive new structures, visual grammar, and specialized containers, the Blue Notebook. Agentic, person, gear.
This is you. Your agency has increased. You aren't just absorbing, you are performing stewardship, deciding which ideas are ancestral enough to save. Part 2, the flight plan, right panel, 4.4. Now, move to the right panel, 4.4, directions for next handwritten cycle. This is where the rubber meets the road. Tomorrow, when you sit down to do your daily journaling, the messy phase, what should you be doing differently because of these lectures? Questions, top row. You should enter your next cycle holding these 3 questions in your mind. 1. Which key ideas survive carryover and why? Don't just copy yesterday's ideas pointlessly. Ask yourself, which ones are strong enough to actually help me today? 2. When does a fragment deserve promotion to Blue Notebook? This is the crucial ancestral form question. You need to actively look for that moment when a messy note becomes a stable structure. 3. How does visual form change sense of whole? When you draw out an idea using visual grammar, does it feel more complete than when you just wrote paragraphs about it? Pay attention to that feeling. Diagram candidates, bottom row. Finally, look at the bottom. These are suggestions for what you might actually draw in your notebook tomorrow to test these theories. The cycle arrows. Try diagramming your own daily loop. Are you actually feeding forward key ideas, or are you resetting every day? Fragment to structure. Try to visually track an idea you're working on. Is it still just fragments, little blocks, or is it hitting that form threshold, the big structure? Textual versus visual timeline. Try mapping out an idea over time using text on one side and visuals on the other. See which one holds up better over a week. Summary. This infographic is your bridge from theory to action. We have built a sophisticated model of learning based on accretion, visual structure, and ancestral forms. Section 4.3 locks that model into place. Section 4.4 gives you the marching orders to go out and test it in the real world of your notebook.
Good morning, everyone. We are stepping back in our timeline today, returning to the very end of January, the 30th and 31st, 2026. We are looking at the infographic titled, Step 1, Polished Notes, Key Ideas, Orientation Markers, and Visual Carryover Across Learning Cycles. Before we dive into the image, we need to understand what Step 1 means in our educational modeling language, EML. You start with raw, messy handwriting, Step 0. Step 1 polished notes is the moment you look back at that mess and extract the gold. You aren't analyzing deeply yet, you are just identifying what matters enough to keep. This specific infographic is a manifesto for stopping the daily reset, the bad habit of starting every learning session from scratch. It shows us how to build a continuous stream of thought. Let's break it down section by section from left to right. Section 1, the engine of continuity, key ideas and carryover. Look at the far left panel. This is the mechanism of continuity. The problem, yesterday versus today. Look at the 2 pieces of paper. On the left, yesterday's cycle. It's full of writing. It's done. On the right, today's cycle. It's blank. Usually, that blank page is terrifying. You sit down and think, what do I write? You start from 0. The big red arrow labeled carryover is the solution. It forbids starting from 0. The solution, glowing cubes. Look at what is traveling along that arrow. 3 glowing blue cubes labeled key ideas. Notice they have little compass icons on them. These are not summaries of yesterday. A summary looks backward. These are configuration points. They look forward. You take the 3 most important insights from yesterday and you physically place them at the top of today's blank page before you start writing. The text bubble below explains why. Guide the next writing cycle. Shape current writing by prior thinking. Example, if yesterday you were studying Roman concrete and you realized the key ingredient was volcanic ash, you don't just file that away. You put volcanic ash as secret ingredient at the top of today's page. Now, whatever you read today about modern cement or geology, you will automatically read it through the lens of volcanic ash. You have configured your attention. The inputs, dreams, and AI projection. Now, look at the thought bubble below that. This addresses a crucial question. Where do these key ideas come from? They don't just come from reading. The image shows inputs from dreams/pictorial language and AI projection. This is vital. EML treats AI not as a replacement thinker, but as a stimulant. You might prompt an AI to extend my thought on Roman concrete. What it spits back is raw material. You don't just paste it in. You read it, you sleep on it, dreams, and your brain synthesizes that external AI input into an internal key idea, one of those glowing cubes. AI is fuel.
You are the engine that turns it into orientation. Section 2, Bridging Time, Orientation Markers. Move to the center left panel, Orientation Markers and Bridges Across Time. This is the architectural result of doing the carryover. The visual, we see a massive, sturdy bridge spanning a chasm between past representations and the current moment. The insight, if you don't carry over key ideas, every day is an island. You have to swim the chasm every morning. By carrying over those glowing cubes, you build a bridge. Ancestral patterns. Look at the cloud forming over the bridge. It's labeled Ancestral Representation/Patterns. When you carry an idea forward day after day, it stops being just a fact. It becomes a stable pattern in your mind, an ancestor. It becomes a lens through which you see everything else. The goal. The text at the bottom says, learning as continuous stream. You want your education to feel like a river, not a series of disconnected puddles. Section 3, the productivity of incompleteness, accretion and form. Shift to the center right panel, accretion and form. This addresses the psychology of learning. Top image, pointers. You see scattered puzzle pieces. They are labeled pointers/touching form. Bottom image, wholeness. You see a complete sphere. The lesson. Key ideas are often incomplete. They're just puzzle pieces, and that is good. The text says, incompleteness is productive, drawing towards construction. Example, if you have a fully finished idea, you file it away. But if you have an intriguing half-finished idea, a pointer, your brain wants to finish it. It draws you back to the work. Carry over the pieces that itch, not the ones that are satisfied. Section 4, a place for everything, containers. Finally, the far right panel, visual representation and containers. We've talked about this in later lectures, but this is where it starts. The visual, 2 books. The top one is a worn diary, daily handwriting. The bottom one is an ornate, glowing blue notebook. The separation. The arrow shows separation of containers. Your daily diary is the messy workshop. It's where you handle the raw fragments and the AI projections. The blue notebook is the museum gallery. It's where you put the stabilized constructs, those glowing cubes once they have solidified into certainty. The role of visuals. Notice the icon for visual depiction, pointing to the blue notebook. Complex ideas, ancestral patterns, are often best stored as diagrams or infographics, visual grammar, because images hold relationships better than words do over time. Summary. This infographic, from way back on January 30th, lays the groundwork for the entire system. It tells you, don't start blank. Use AI and your own reflections to generate key ideas. Physically place those ideas at the start of your next day to act as orientation markers. This builds a bridge across time, turning fragmented work into a continuous stream.
Good morning, everyone. We are stepping back in our timeline today, returning to the very end of January, the 30th and 31st, 2026. We are looking at the infographic titled, Step 1, Polished Notes, Key Ideas, Orientation Markers, and Visual Carryover Across Learning Cycles. Before we dive into the image, we need to understand what Step 1 means in our educational modeling language, EML. You start with raw, messy handwriting, Step 0. Step 1 polished notes is the moment you look back at that mess and extract the gold. You aren't analyzing deeply yet. You are just identifying what matters enough to keep. This specific infographic is a manifesto for stopping the daily reset, the bad habit of starting every learning session from scratch. It shows us how to build a continuous stream of thought. Let's break it down section by section from left to right. Section 1, the engine of continuity, key ideas and carryover. Look at the far left panel. This is the mechanism of continuity. The problem, yesterday versus today. Look at the 2 pieces of paper. On the left, yesterday's cycle. It's full of writing. It's done. On the right, today's cycle. It's blank. Usually, that blank page is terrifying. You sit down and think, what do I write? You start from 0. The big red arrow labeled carryover is the solution. It forbids starting from 0. The solution, glowing cubes. Look at what is traveling along that arrow. 3 glowing blue cubes labeled key ideas. Notice they have little compass icons on them. These are not summaries of yesterday. A summary looks backward. These are configuration points. They look forward. You take the 3 most important insights from yesterday and you physically place them at the top of today's blank page before you start writing. The text bubble below explains why. Guide the next writing cycle. Shape current writing by prior thinking.
Example, if yesterday you were studying Roman concrete and you realized the key ingredient was volcanic ash, you don't just file that away. You put volcanic ash as secret ingredient at the top of today's page. Now, whatever you read today about modern cement or geology, you will automatically read it through the lens of volcanic ash. You have configured your attention. The inputs, dreams, and AI projection. Now, look at the thought bubble below that. This addresses a crucial question. Where do these key ideas come from? They don't just come from reading. The image shows inputs from dreams/pictorial language and AI projection. This is vital. EML treats AI not as a replacement thinker, but as a stimulant. You might prompt an AI to extend my thought on Roman concrete. What it spits back is raw material. You don't just paste it in. You read it, you sleep on it, dreams, and your brain synthesizes that external AI input into an internal key idea, one of those glowing cubes. AI is fuel. You are the engine that turns it into orientation. Section 2, Bridging Time, Orientation Markers. Move to the center left panel, Orientation Markers and Bridges Across Time. This is the architectural result of doing the carryover. The visual. We see a massive, sturdy bridge spanning a chasm between past representations and the current moment. The insight. If you don't carry over key ideas, every day is an island. You have to swim the chasm every morning. By carrying over those glowing cubes, you build a bridge. Ancestral patterns. Look at the cloud forming over the bridge. It's labeled ancestral representation/patterns. When you carry an idea forward day after day, it stops being just a fact. It becomes a stable pattern in your mind, an ancestor. It becomes a lens through which you see everything else. The goal. The text at the bottom says, learning as continuous stream. You want your education to feel like a river, not a series of disconnected puddles. Section 3, the productivity of incompleteness, accretion and form. Shift to the center right panel, accretion and form. This addresses the psychology of learning. Top image, pointers. You see scattered puzzle pieces. They are labeled pointers/touching form. Bottom image, wholeness. You see a complete sphere. The lesson. Key ideas are often incomplete. They're just puzzle pieces, and that is good. The text says, incompleteness is productive, drawing towards construction. Example, if you have a fully finished idea, you file it away. But if you have an intriguing half-finished idea, a pointer, your brain wants to finish it. It draws you back to the work. Carry over the pieces that itch, not the ones that are satisfied. Section 4, a place for everything, containers. Finally, the far right panel, visual representation and containers. We've talked about this in later lectures, but this is where it starts. The visual, 2 books. The top one is a worn diary, daily handwriting. The bottom one is an ornate, glowing blue notebook. The separation. The arrow shows separation of containers. Your daily diary is the messy workshop. It's where you handle the raw fragments and the AI projections. The blue notebook is the museum gallery. It's where you put the stabilized constructs, those glowing cubes once they have solidified into certainty. The role of visuals. Notice the icon for visual depiction, pointing to the blue notebook. Complex ideas, ancestral patterns, are often best stored as diagrams or infographics, visual grammar, because images hold relationships better than words do over time. Summary. This infographic, from way back on January 30th, lays the groundwork for the entire system. It tells you, don't start blank. Use AI and your own reflections to generate key ideas. Physically place those ideas at the start of your next day to act as orientation markers. This builds a bridge across time, turning fragmented work into a continuous stream.
Good morning, class. Today is a significant pivot point in our timeline. We have arrived at February 1st, 2026. We are looking at the Step 3 academic essay. Up until now, our focus in the lectures on January 29th, 30th, and the earlier parts of February 1st has been largely focused on stabilization. How do we take the chaos of information, anchor it with handwriting, use key ideas to orient ourselves, and build stable structures, ancestral forms, out of past fragments? That is all essential work, but it is all fundamentally looking backward or at the present. Today's entry, titled Future Pasting as Grammar, Anticipation, Orientation, and the Writing IDE, changes the game entirely. It asks, how does this system help us look forward? This text is a manifesto for transforming learning from a reactive process into a strategic, visionary, and creative act. There is no infographic provided for this specific text, so we must look closely at the powerful mental imagery and metaphors the essay itself constructs. First,
The core metaphor, the writing IDE, strategic outlook. The first major concept the essay introduces is shifting our view of writing. The textual image. The essay argues we must stop viewing writing merely as expression, squeezing thoughts out of your head onto paper. Instead, we must view writing as an IDE, integrated development environment. Explanation and strategic link. For those who don't code, an IDE is the complex software interface programmers use. It doesn't just let them type code. It has tools for debugging, testing, organizing files, and predicting what they might type next. It is a coordinated environment. When the essay says to treat writing as an IDE, it is demanding a strategic outlook. The reactive learner sits down with a blank page and hopes for inspiration. They are at the mercy of their current mood. The strategic learner, IDE, orchestrates their environment. They have their previous key ideas lined up, orientation. They have their future cast ready, anticipation. They are putting thoughts into a structured system designed to execute them efficiently. Example, think of a master chef. They don't just walk into a kitchen and start chopping randomly. They have a mise en place, everything organized, ingredients prepped, tools ready before the heat goes on. The writing IDE is your cognitive mise en place. 2. The anchor and the oscillation, the mechanism. The essay describes how this machine works. It relies on 3 temporal, time-based parts working together. The anchor, the present. The text reiterates that handwriting is the temporal anchor. It forces commitment in the present moment. Without it, thoughts drift away. Orientation, the past. We carry forward key ideas from yesterday. The text calls this a governance function. It limits drift. It ensures strategy. Anticipation, the future. This is the new element. We actively project where we are going. The visionary insight. The essay argues that learning doesn't happen in a straight line forward. It happens through oscillation. We swing back to the past for orientation, anchor in the present to write, and swing forward to the future to anticipate. This constant back and forth movement is what generates deep understanding. 3. Future casting as grammar, visionary thinking and creativity. This is the heart of the lecture and the most radical idea in the entry. The textual image. The essay defines future casting not as predicting the future, but as a grammatical act. It describes this anticipation as a beam rather than a plan, a directional field. Explanation and visionary link. Why call it grammar? Grammar isn't optional. You have to use it to make sense. The essay is arguing that looking forward is not something you do only when you feel creative. It is a mandatory rule of the learning system. The beam metaphor for creativity. This is crucial for creativity. A plan is rigid. If step 1 fails, the plan dies. A beam of light projected into the darkness is visionary. Strategic example. A master chess grandmaster doesn't know exactly what moves will happen 20 turns from now. That's impossible speculation. But they cast a beam, a directional field of attack, that guides their decisions right now. They are playing the present move based on a structured anticipation of the future. Creative example. Writing. A novelist might not know exactly how their book ends, but before writing chapter 10 today, they cast a future beam. By the end of this section, the protagonist must lose their trust in their mentor. They don't know how it will happen yet. That's the creative discovery of writing, but the beam provides the directional field that creativity is possible. Without the beam, you are just wandering. With the beam, you are exploring with intent. Summary. The shift to agency. If you look at the 4.3 explicit links to EML section at the end of the text, notice the emphasis on the agentic layer, intention setting, anticipatory authorship. This January 1st entry is about taking control. The old model of learning is about absorbing the past. This new model is about using the past, orientation, as a platform to stand on, anchoring yourself in the hard work of the present, handwriting, in order to throw a visionary beam into the darkness ahead, future casting. It transforms the student from a passive receptacle of knowledge into an active strategic designer of their own future understanding.
Good morning, architects. Welcome back to February 1st, 2026. In our previous sessions today, we looked at the grand vision of a knowledge space and the constellation moment where ideas suddenly click into place. But how do we make that happen reliably? We can't just sit around waiting for lightning to strike. We need to build a machine that forces those moments to happen. Today, we are looking at the Step 2 analytical study for this date, titled The Writing IDE as a Multi-Platform Temporal System. This is where we stop pretending that learning is just sitting down with a book and a pen. This is where we admit that modern learning is an engineering problem that requires a sophisticated system of components working together. First, we need to understand the core metaphor. What is an IDE? In computer programming,
IDE stands for Integrated Development Environment. A serious programmer doesn't just open a basic text file and start typing code. They open an IDE, like Visual Studio or PyCharm. An IDE is a cockpit. It has the text editor in the middle, but surrounded by file managers, debugging tools, terminal windows, and autocomplete features. It is a single, coordinated environment designed to make complex thought executable. This analytical study argues that we must treat writing the exact same way. You don't just write, you operate a writing environment. Then, what are the instruments? The study defines the writing IDE as a multi-platform system. It combines different types of tools into one workflow. Look at the components we are trying to integrate. The anchor platform, handwriting. This is where the pilot sits. It's the slowest, most deliberate platform used for final commitment to an idea. The input platform, reading, gathering raw materials from the knowledge space. The mapping platform, visual representation, using infographics to see the terrain. The acceleration platform, AI projection. I want to zoom in on that last one, AI projection. In the old bucket model of learning, AI is seen as a threat, a cheat tool that fills the bucket for you. But in the writing IDE model, AI is an integral component of the system. It is the engine booster. When you have a vague fragment of a thought, you don't just stare at it. You feed it into the AI component to project possible extensions, counterarguments, or connections you hadn't seen. You don't accept the AI's output as the answer. You treat it as raw material that you pull back into your cockpit to navigate further. You cannot build a modern learning system without integrating this accelerator. How does this connect to our previous discussions on scaffolding? Remember, scaffolds are temporary structures we build to hold up complex ideas until they can stand on their own. Think of the writing IDE as a permanent, reusable scaffolding system. When you sit down to work, you don't have to reinvent the process. The system is already set up. You have a slot for your previous key ideas, orientation. You have a slot for your future cast, anticipation. You have your AI tools ready to extend your reach. The IDE itself is the ultimate scaffold. It holds your cognitive process in place so it doesn't collapse under the weight of complexity. So, the takeaway from this step 2 analysis is a shift in identity. Stop thinking of yourself as a student with a notebook. Start thinking of yourself as a systems operator running a complex cognitive machine. Your job is to keep all the components, handwriting, reading, visuals, and AI, working together smoothly to navigate the knowledge space.
Good morning, class. Today is a significant pivot point in our timeline. We have arrived at February 1st, 2026. We are looking at the Step 3 academic essay. Up until now, our focus in the lectures on January 29th, 30th, and the earlier parts of February 1st has been largely focused on stabilization. How do we take the chaos of information, anchor it with handwriting, use key ideas to orient ourselves, and build stable structures, ancestral forms, out of past fragments? That is all essential work, but it is all fundamentally looking backward or at the present. Today's entry, titled Future Pasting as Grammar, Anticipation, Orientation, and the Writing IDE, changes the game entirely. It asks, how does this system help us look forward? This text is a manifesto for transforming learning from a reactive process into a strategic, visionary, and creative act. There is no infographic provided for this specific text, so we must look closely at the powerful mental imagery and metaphors the essay itself constructs. First, the core metaphor, the writing IDE, strategic outlook. The first major concept the essay introduces is shifting our view of writing. The textual image. The essay argues we must stop viewing writing merely as expression, squeezing thoughts out of your head onto paper. Instead, we must view writing as an IDE, integrated development environment. Explanation and strategic link. For those who don't code, an IDE is the complex software interface programmers use. It doesn't just let them type code. It has tools for debugging, testing, organizing files, and predicting what they might type next. It is a coordinated environment. When the essay says to treat writing as an IDE, it is demanding a strategic outlook. The reactive learner sits down with a blank page and hopes for inspiration. They are at the mercy of their current mood. The strategic learner, IDE, orchestrates their environment. They have their previous key ideas lined up, orientation. They have their future cast ready, anticipation. They are putting thoughts into a structured system designed to execute them efficiently. Example, think of a master chef. They don't just walk into a kitchen and start chopping randomly. They have a mise en place, everything organized, ingredients prepped, tools ready before the heat goes on. The writing IDE is your cognitive mise en place. 2. The anchor and the oscillation, the mechanism. The essay describes how this machine works.
It relies on three temporal, time-based parts working together. The anchor, the present. The text reiterates that handwriting is the temporal anchor. It forces commitment in the present moment. Without it, thoughts drift away. Orientation, the past. We carry forward key ideas from yesterday. The text calls this a governance function. It limits drift. It ensures strategy. Anticipation, the future. This is the new element. We actively project where we are going. The visionary insight. The essay argues that learning doesn't happen in a straight line forward. It happens through oscillation. We swing back to the past for orientation, anchor in the present to write, and swing forward to the future to anticipate. This constant back and forth movement is what generates deep understanding. 3. Future casting as grammar, visionary thinking and creativity. This is the heart of the lecture and the most radical idea in the entry. The textual image. The essay defines future casting not as predicting the future, but as a grammatical act. It describes this anticipation as a beam rather than a plan, a directional field. Explanation and visionary link. Why call it grammar? Grammar isn't optional. You have to use it to make sense. The essay is arguing that looking forward is not something you do only when you feel creative. It is a mandatory rule of the learning system. The beam metaphor for creativity. This is crucial for creativity. A plan is rigid. If step 1 fails, the plan dies. A beam of light projected into the darkness is visionary. Strategic example. A master chess grandmaster doesn't know exactly what moves will happen 20 turns from now. That's impossible speculation. But they cast a beam, a directional field of attack, that guides their decisions right now. They are playing the present move based on a structured anticipation of the future. Creative example. Writing. A novelist might not know exactly how their book ends, but before writing chapter 10 today, they cast a future beam. By the end of this section, the protagonist must lose their trust in their mentor. They don't know how it will happen yet. That's the creative discovery of writing, but the beam provides the directional field that creativity is possible. Without the beam, you are just wandering. With the beam, you are exploring with intent. Summary. The shift to agency. If you look at the 4.3 explicit links to EML section at the end of the text, notice the emphasis on the agentic layer, intention setting, anticipatory authorship. This January 1st entry is about taking control. The old model of learning is about absorbing the past. This new model is about using the past, orientation, as a platform to stand on, anchoring yourself in the hard work of the present, handwriting, in order to throw a visionary beam into the darkness ahead, future casting. It transforms the student from a passive receptacle of knowledge into an active strategic designer of their own future understanding.
Welcome to the final session of our Knowledge Space Experiment. Over the last 2 weeks, from late January to early February 2026, we have undertaken a radical rethinking of what it means to learn. We are going to conclude with 3 final images that summarize everything we've covered. Conclusion 1. Synthesis of the Knowledge Space Experiment. Please look at the first infographic. Conclusion 1. Synthesis of the Knowledge Space Experiment. This image is the map of our entire 2-week journey. The Great Shift, top. We started by rejecting the old model, possession, bucket, on the top left, the idea that your brain is a container to be stuffed with facts. We replaced it with the new model, shared knowledge space, on the top right, a vast, navigable territory that you occupy. The central engine, middle. In the center, we see the machine we built to navigate that space, the EML read-write-return engine. It starts on the left with input and fragments, the raw, confusing data from books, AI, and dreams. You don't just absorb this, you process it in the writing IDE, cognitive cockpit. Look at the tools: handwriting anchor, AI projection, and visual grammar. The building process, center right. You use those tools to build scaffolding around the fragments. You keep returning to it until you hit that flash of insight, the constellation moment, vision emerges. The destination, bottom right. That vision solidifies into an ancestral form, a stable, reusable idea, which you store in your blue notebook. The cycle, bottom. Crucially, the arrow at the bottom shows return and continuity. You take those ancestral forms and carry them back into the writing IDE to start the cycle again. This is the summary of our digital notebook experiment. Learning is not about intake. It is a cyclical engineering process. Now, let's look at the consequences of that shift.
If you were building ancestral forms in a vast territory, when are you finished? Conclusion 2. The endless occupation and strategic agency. Please turn to the second infographic. Conclusion 2. The endless occupation and strategic agency. This is a picture of your new life as a learner. The unfinishable castle. The central image is a massive castle that is perpetually under construction. This is your knowledge. You never finish it. The goal is endless occupation. The foundation. Look closely at what the castle is built upon. It rests on a stack of huge, glowing ancestral forms, Blue Notebook Foundation. Your past work is the bedrock for your future building. The builder. Who is in charge? You are. Look at the strategic learner on the highest tower. The strategy. What are they doing? They aren't just laying bricks, they are using a massive future casting, directional beam, to pierce the fog ahead. The agency. This image is about agency. You are no longer a passive recipient of facts. You are the architect, the builder, and the visionary strategist of your own knowledge structure. You decide where the beam points, and you direct the scaffolding and integration efforts to build towards it.
Finally, let's look at the system that makes all of this possible. We've talked about many individual parts, sandboxes, sleep, visual grammar. How do they fit together? Conclusion 3. The EML system, a cognitive operating architecture. Please look at the final infographic. Conclusion 3. The EML system, a cognitive operating architecture. This image presents EML, Educational Modeling Language, not as a list of tips, but as a complete machine, an operating system for your mind. The machine. This fantastical engine represents the integrated EML system. The layers. Notice how the machine is built in layers corresponding to the EML framework. Structural layer, the bottom. The foundation holds the writing IDE, sandbox, and visual grammar tools. This is the hardware. Cognitive temporal layer, the middle. The gears and pendulums represent the rhythm of the system, the time and return loop, the sleep/reboot capsule, and the slow, steady accretion process. Agentic layer, the top. At the controls is the strategic learner, setting intention and casting the future casting beam. The flow. You can see the entire process in action. Raw input fragments go into the hopper on the left. They are processed through the layers of the machine. And what comes out on the right? Polished, glowing ancestral forms, ready to be filed in the Blue Notebook. This is the conclusion of our experiment. You don't need more facts. You need a better machine for processing them. EML is that machine. It is the architecture that allows you to become the strategic builder of your own endless castle of knowledge. Thank you.